Hey everyone, it's Scott Wonker. No hat this evening. It's late at night. Well, not that late at night, but my hat's in the car. Forgot it. So today we're going to review Doomtown Reloaded by AEG. This is actually on scheduled for cancellation here in October, but I thought I'd do a review of it before it kind of came off the shelves. So for those people that were interested in kind of a last minute purchase, you could pick it up. So, Doomtown Reloaded is a living card game. It's actually like in its second or third incarnation. I can't remember how many. It used to be a collectible card game with one publisher, and then when AEG took it over, they turned it into a living card game where you buy a base set and then you expand into can buy expansions. The expansions have been coming out honestly roughly about once a month for quite a while. I just finished off collecting off all the sets here just a couple of weeks ago. So I happen to have all the cards now, which should tell you something about how I feel about the game. It's a game set in 1878 in the town of Gomorrah. Gomorrah is this weird West town. So if you remember the days, remember the old television series Wild Wild West, or kind of that weird, interesting mix between steampunk and Western themes. That's the kind of world we're talking about. You have kind of these steampunk themes. You have carnival themes if you go later on to some of the other expansions. You have weird magical stuff. You have Native American mythology stuff going on. But you also have steampunk type stuff and weird inventions and weird abilities. Now, the game is set where each of the players, you can play. Typically, you play two players. It plays best at two players, but you can play more. But two players is best. Where you each represent a faction within the town, and you're trying to gain the most influence in the town. And the person who ends up with the most influence, or influence, wins. So that's kind of the game in a nutshell. So let's first take a look at the components. Now there aren't a lot of components as a living card game, but I do want to go through a set of components with you real quick. It basically consists of a couple of rule books, which we'll talk about in the rule book section. It also has player mats. Excuse me, let me pull out a player mat here and show you. These are what the player mats look like. The player mats are really nice. It comes with two of them, one for each player, so you can play two players very easily. Whenever you buy an expansion, you get another sheet. I put them in. The nice thing about it is that the player mat has spaces for all the cards you're going to play. It also has lots of explanations about stuff. So the player mats are definitely a big help, and you get two of those. Now, obviously, the big part of the game, if you're curious, is going to be the cards. So let's talk about the cards a little bit. I'll pull out a couple cards here as an example. Here we go. So these are what the cards look like. These are the cards. They're very, very pretty artwork. I think this is some of the best artwork I've seen on slides in a while. Here, let's see if you can get there so you can see the artwork pretty well. There you go. It's got artwork at the top, description and powers at the back. We have poker symbols here, standard bridge deck, actually, I guess you technically call it, our poker deck symbols here. This is a 10 of clubs. Those are used, first of all, for initiative, and they'll talk about that, and also they're used for combat when we get engaged in combat. And so there's one example. Here's another one, hiding in the shadows. There you go. Now, I've also noticed the nice thing about these is they have keywords that trigger off of things like you see here, and they bold them. So this one says noon, and so that's something that actually triggers at noon. And this one also is a noon trigger. So they did a really nice job with the components. It comes with a fairly decent deck. It actually comes with enough cards to build two pre-built decks built in, and enough cards to honestly build probably a couple more decks. A deck is a 52-card living card deck. It's kind of not a deck builder like you classically think of, but an LCG. Where you buy cards in expansions and then you create decks out of them. So, really nice cards. I really like them. The backs, let me show you. I didn't show you the backs. Have a nice Western feel to them. So I think they did a great job for the cards. It also comes with little cardboard tokens, just to count influence and money and stuff. So they've got that as well. So that's it. And when I noticed that when I bought all the expansions, that they're all pretty uniform. Some of the complaints I've heard with other games is that when you buy expansions, they're slightly different. When you buy expansions, they don't match, and that's not true here. So good job on the components. So let's talk a little bit about the art. In the previous section I talked a little about the art because components and art are kind of tied very closely together here. But I want to talk a little bit more about how the art works. I think they did a really good job, given the nature of the mechanics, a really good job on the art. First of all, the cards themselves are nice and solid. As I mentioned before, the backs of the cards are very, very pretty and not distracting. They got skulls on them, which is kind of nice. And they're all, here's a deck, and you can see here they're all uniform, which in a living card game can be a challenge when you're going through multiple printers and stuff. And they did a very good job of that. Now, this is what a card looks like, right like this. Now, it's got several parts to it, and they did a good job of distinguishing the parts. Let me see if I can come up with an example here. Here's a better example with a little more information on it. So you see here we've got a poker number here, a bridge card, whatever you want to call it, a standard playing card number up at the top. That's used for initiative and combat and for some other kind of combat-esque level of rolls. We have the character. The art, some of the cards are good, some of them I would say are not so good. I think it's good art for the most part. Occasionally there have been some drawings I've not been happy with. It varies widely. The style is, and I think this is okay in a Weird West game where the style for, say, your Native American Indian cards are very different from, say, your Cattle Ranch cards or from your Outlaw cards. So the cards are different in terms of style. That's okay. I'm pretty good with that. So you can see here, to give you an example, here's the style of one card here. This is a scientist. And then we have an action card here. And you see it has kind of a similar coloring, but the style is a little bit different. Then at the bottom here you have the actual kind of text of the card itself, and so pretty useful information there, nice and easy to read. You have cost information down here and maintenance information down here, all really, really useful information. So also here on the left side of the card, you'll have bullets which represent basically how much skill that person has, how much influence that person has, and what their combat value is. So really, really good art. I'm really happy with it, and definitely worth collecting just for the art alone. So let's talk a little bit about the rulebook and the rulebook, how it works. So when you buy Doomtown, the base set, it comes with actually two rulebooks. Here's the base rulebook, and then here's something called Getting to Know Gamora. There you go. So let's talk about the base rulebook first. The base rulebook at the back has a kind of poker hands table. I didn't find it particularly interesting. I played poker for a long time, so I thought it was kind of a point. But there's it. Now, you've got your table of contents and an introduction, and then you've got right away what's in the box. And it talks about all the cards and how they get through it. Now, I will tell you that one of the tricks here is that when you buy the base set, there are two pre-built decks, and they're pre-wrapped and everything, and you're not supposed to separate them and shuffle them. And I did, and I actually ended up having to go back and rebuild the decks because of the introduction to Gamora, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then it goes through and explains all the different types of cards, the suits and values and what they represent. So clubs, diamonds, hearts, and spades actually represent specific types of cards. It talks about jokers, it talks about the counters, then it talks about the rules. Now I will tell you that honestly, I don't think this particular rule book does that good a job explaining the rules, but that's okay, and I'll tell you why. It talks about the rules kind of in a piecemeal fashion. It talks about how gambling works, it talks about phase, so on and so forth. Now, where I think the rule books really shine in Doomtown is this book here. It's called Introduction to Getting to Know Gamora. And basically what this is designed to do is you take the two decks of cards that you're given and you set out the player mats and you step through about 5 rounds of a game. Actually, it looks like, wow, it's a lot more than that, yeah. You play through a bunch of rounds of the game. So it takes you through and shows you how the game is played. Given the complexity of the game, I think, honestly, this is the only way you can teach the game. There are a lot of rules. It's kind of complicated. Okay, from my perspective, I'm not a big LCG or CCG player. I found the rules pretty complicated. This made it a lot easier. So if you're going to play this, pull this one out and use it. So let's talk a little about the theme. The theme in this game is absolutely stellar. It, I'm a big Wild Wild West fan. Old school 1960s television series, and this is right up that ballpark. And the mechanics of the game and the way you occupy territories and the way you use poker and all that kind of stuff. It feels really cool. I mean, the mechanics sometimes feel a little strange to fit that Wild West theme, but in general, I think they've just done a really neat job doing the theme on this card. They've got interesting characters with interesting abilities. The abilities match the characters. And what their characters seem to be about. They've got a good mix of, once you buy some of the expansions, of standard kind of Wild West good guys and bad guys like sheriffs and posse members and bad cowboys and outlaws and good cowboys and cattle ranchers. And you've also got interesting mixes of circus performers, which are kind of weird mystical ones, and Native American characters and steampunk mad scientist characters, and all sorts of interesting special abilities as well. And so I think they've done a really, really good job with the theme and theming stuff together. And it is very closely tied. This is definitely not what I would classify as a pasted-on theme at all. The theme is deeply integrated into both the mechanics and kind of how the game is played. So good, solid work on theme. Okay, so let's talk about playing the game. I'm going to start by saying this is a living card game. Everybody has their own deck and their own playmat. Now the playmats interact with each other. You can move from your playmat to the other person's playmat, which means it's fairly important if you're not just using one set. If you've got two people using separate sets, you definitely want to sleeve your cards with different mat colors so that you can make sure you can separate out cards at the end. I don't point that out. It's fairly important if you're using two different decks from two different people. Where you have different owners. Now, the game has a series of phases. The first phase is what they call the gambling phase. The gambling phase, you basically draw cards off the top of your deck, and then the lowest poker hand wins. There's some cheating abilities and stuff and so forth, but generally it's lowest poker hand wins and gets to go first. And then you go into the upkeep phase, where everybody pays for any cards that are currently in pay. Some cards have a cost associated with them in terms of skulls, coinage, and so you got to pay for those. Then you move into the high noon phase, and that's where the vast majority of the activity happens, is the high noon phase. And basically, one player plays a card, first player plays a card, and you alternate back and forth until everybody's played all the cards that they want to play for the round. And also, not only can you play cards out of your hand, you can move cards that are on the board, so on and so forth. Now, the boards are set up so basically your main play field consists of a series of buildings. You'll build an increasing number of buildings on your side of, quote, the fence or the side of town. And what you'll do is you'll take dudes, characters, and move them into buildings to take control of them. And the player that has the largest number of dudes with influence in a given building occupies that building and controls it. And ultimately, if any one player has more control than the other player has influence in the game, and the influence is on every single character card, then they win. So the objective here is to occupy as many buildings as you can to gain control. Now, I will tell you I've read a lot of discussions about the game. I think that's one of the things that a lot of players miss. And someone pointed this out when they talked about the Wild West genre. The Wild West genre and history is all about a long planning phase and a long kind of chess-like movements followed by a very quick shootout. And the example we discussed was Tombstone, where Tombstone was a very complicated political situation in Tombstone, Arizona. The shootout at the OK Corral happened. The actual shootout lasted maybe 5 minutes or less. It was very, very fast, but a lot of people died as a result. But there was a lot of back-end political stuff that was going on for days, if not weeks, before that shootout happened. And so I think a lot of players, when they play the game, tend to gravitate towards that shootout too quickly. It's really Doomtown feels to me, if you're playing it right, feels more like chess. It's about moving my pieces into buildings in such a way that I'm getting control of those buildings and avoiding conflict unless it's absolutely necessary. That tends to be the way I tend to play it. Now, other players like to just duke it out. So I think it kind of depends upon your play style, which way you like to go, whether you want to go for that fast combat, other way. So regardless, the noon phase, you move characters around, you play cards. There are different types of cards. There are character cards, there are building cards, there are item cards, which give you items, and there are action cards that let you do special things. So there are a whole bunch of different cards that let you do different things. The big things are really dudes and locations. In fact, it's interesting, each of the suits is a different thing. I think dudes are spades, locations are diamonds, and then clubs and hearts are actions and items. That's kind of neat because they use the suits to distinguish between the two. So you go through the phase, you play until nobody wants to take any more actions, or, well, everybody's dead. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And then you go into the sundown phase. The sundown phase basically you make sure that nobody has won, or see if anybody has won, and then you move into the next day. Now, also in these mechanics, you have a mechanic for what's called booting. Booting is some of the actions require you to turn the character sideways. You may recognize this from other collector card games where you turn them around or turn them sideways to use them. I can't use the word, it's copyrighted. Or trademark or something. I'm not supposed to use that word. But some actions require it. And the nice thing is it'll say boot on the card. It says, if you boot this card, here's what happens. And so all the cards tell you the types of actions you can take with them, so it's kind of cool. So you basically play that. Once you've entered into sundown, you enter the next day. You do a fresh gambling, find out who's going first, and that's it. So that's really the game. The game is a very, very classic living card game, but it does have a geography to it because of the player mats, which is kind of neat. And it has a very chess-like feel to it. And so that kind of gives you a feeling for the game and what it's like. So what did I think about this game? Normally, I'm not a big take that kind of game. I'm also, I will tell you, incredibly resistant to collector card games and even living card games. I'm typically resistant to. I will tell you that right now, in terms of my collection I have no collector card games anywhere in my set. I take an exception to that. I have Mage Wars Arena. I have 2 decks of that. I guess that's technically, I don't know whether it's a collector card game or because I've never seen booster packs for it, or whether it's a living card game. It's so small, and I think it's more like an LCG. But that set aside, the only real LCGs I have out there are Smash Up, Red Dragon Inn, and Doomtown. Now, I wouldn't even classify Smash Up and Red Dragon Inn as so much LCGs. Because, well, I guess they are technically LCGs, but really you're just buying more characters with some interesting special abilities. Well, okay, so it is an LCG. I hadn't really considered that. Okay, I'll give it the Red Dragon and Smash Up or LCGs. I don't think they're nearly as LCG-ish as, say, something like Android Netrunner. So generally, I tend to shy away. I have lots and lots of games. The fact that I've only got 3 of these LCGs is kind of astounding, and no CCGs. I'm also not big on take that combat style games. I've got a few in my collection, but not a ton. That setting aside, I really like this game. I like the chess-like maneuvering that's related to it. I love the theme. The whole weird Wild West is just a lot of fun. The cards have interesting powers. The characters are interesting. You get to learn a lot about the characters as a result. So definitely I would put it on my playlist and my own list. Now, I will tell you it is going out of print. AEG announced this summer, about a month ago, that they were going to stop releasing it. They were going to release the property back to Pinnacle. I believe it's Pinnacle. Pinnacle has not made a decision what they want to do with it yet. But I went out on Amazon, and there's a ton of copies for sale. And AEG has promised they're going to continue to sell it through October, at least October. They've got 2 more card releases that are coming out. And so that's it. Also another components thing I didn't mention. The box is nice and big. When you buy, you kind of feel a little gypped because you buy this huge box and then the cards occupy maybe 25% of the box. Now the nice thing is, not even 25% honestly, the nice thing is that there's enough space in the box to hold currently all the expansions. In fact, I bought all the expansions and it perfectly fit in the box. Of course, they're coming out with 2 more expansions, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I might have to buy a second base set just for the sake of having another box for it. So that's it. A good game, a lot of fun. Takes about 45 minutes to an hour to play. It's a little challenging to learn, but it's worth it. Definitely go through that Getting to Know Gamora book. It definitely helps. Hope you enjoy the review.